access, canvas, and what else?
Canvas and blind. Blind's the actual home. That's what really all.
GLIM.
Yes. Like EIM. That's one I really worried about. That way you can get the homework worked out. Look at you, man. Thank you for that. Down. Perfect. And there we are, right here. Awesome. Good stuff. And it's got speakers built in. Fantastic. That's great. That's great. Look at that. Wow. All right. You the man, Lips. Awesome. And Albert, I got you now. So I'll get you in there and I'll send that message to you today. And let you know that.
Thank you.
That way you can start rock and rolling with the tests. All right.
So I'm going to show you some tricks to it also. So the more we talk and whatnot, well, it'll zoom in on.
It'll zoom in on the person. So
Mhm.
it's got a, wow, that's cool.
So I go to enhancement mode. See, right now it's showing us right here.
Mm-hmm.
So the more we talk,
More to zoom in. Interesting.
and then I can take control of it right here with that. Take control of it. So
You can pan around.
that's my.
Wow, that's cool.
Then zoom in.
That's too cool. Look at that.
Then auto focus. Now I can go out here, and then you still can see me talking. So we can have a dialect with one another, and it'll split the screen up to 3 different.
Jeez. And it has the overarching one there too. Interesting. You can't beat that.
I think that's the way the university I'm going to end up going with the different classrooms and everything.
Yeah. That way you can,
You can teach and then have a hybrid class.
that's so cool. Oh, let me, hello. Alrighty.
How you doing, sir?
Hey, how you doing, Mike?
Good, good. Just checking again. So I have the account now, but
You got the Glime account or the Canvas?
not a Glide, the canvas.
Okay.
And I was just waiting for you to send me the Glide account.
Do you have an email access, the inbox on Canvas?
Yeah.
Did it not go to you?
Not
So I
the
thought it
Glide
was-
one.
Not the Glime? Okay. I'll resend that for you.
Okay.
I was
Okay.
wondering.
I was
what
trying to do the
happened, 'cause I saw you just standing out there.
assignment for today,
Like you was in dog.
but I didn't have the access to Glide.
Yeah, you're good. You're fine. So yeah, you're good. We're not gonna.
Make sure to do it though.
Yeah, I'm not really counting late off for
Okay.
stuff. We're just making sure that the main thing is just get everybody up to speed, make sure they're
Okay.
knocking the stuff out. So yeah, I'll get that resent to you. Maybe after class, I'll probably give you the number
Yeah.
and we'll walk through and knock it out right here. Yeah.
And then next week we're having class, in-person class? Or
In-person class, and this last one for a couple weeks, and then we'll have a couple weeks at the very end where it'll be back in person. That way, we can do any like Q&A stuff and get everybody feeling good about the test, and any of the last minute questions or whatever people aren't feeling sure about, we can knock it out. Yeah, man. Absolutely. Alrighty, so live, well, that's good. All right, so we got that. Alrighty. All right. 9:10. I guess we can go ahead and get started. Yeah, if you've signed in or haven't signed in, I've got a login sheet here. Good morning. Good, good, sir. We'll just pass. I'll just keep it on the edge over here. People coming in and out. Perfect. So those of us joining us virtually, welcome. Hopefully this one goes through. You can access this one, today's class. We're going to be going over lesson 2. Awesome. Thank you. And the federal aviation regulations. We're going to be getting into the weeds about the different laws that are associated with aviation and our drone, one second. Oh, you can sign in. I got the, okay. There you go, right there. With the drone and how it affects the aviation Federal Aviation Administration's overall mission. So, but before we get into that, I want to ask: is there anybody figure out the homework? Is there any other? Is that kind of going smooth? Is there any feedback from what y'all done so far? Is it kind of difficult? Kind of easy? What you got?
To some extent, the issue I had, first I had to, kind of bookmark from the email to log to the instructor, ASU instructor. Well, once I get that, then I can get into it.
Okay.
And after that, then it comes to get into the GLIM. I had to go back to my email and kind of click where you set up the email where it says GLIM, and I had to click on that thing.
Okay.
So there's no direct path that I could have followed to make it a smoother transition. That was my only hang-ups.
To access the homepage of Line?
Right,
So you're talking
yeah.
about? Okay. Yeah, I can resend the link for the actual homepage. You should just be able to go Google Line and go into sign in, and then, after you get your login set up, the access code gets you initial entry, and then you can type your email, get your password, and then at that point you have direct access, and only you can access it. And then you can go in and do what you want, how you please, study how you want, and then obviously take a practice test for homework. But did that answer your question? That helps?
I know both of them. Like you said, you bookmark.
Yeah.
I bookmark both of them and open both of them. So you switch back and forth. Like you said, it ain't no direct path. Once you go by
It's like you can't log.
you got to log
Really?
all the way back through.
Okay.
If you don't bookmark it and open both of them,
Gotcha. Okay. Well, it's good to know. I'll see if I can get a direct link.
Yeah.
And post it on the campus for everybody. That way you're not going through a tunnel to try to get this to be homework. Well, cool. All right. Well, anything else? Is homework going fairly smooth? Is it easy to understand? Kind of straightforward. Just kind of knock out the questions.
But then like, after you do the practice, then they have another one that you could says the test, and they give you 60 rather than the 20, 25 to 30.
Right.
So I somewhat got a little confused, but then I just stayed with that the 30 that you was telling us to do, and I just did that.
That's good. That's perfect. That's all. Yeah. The final exam, what the FAA Part 107 is going to be it's 60 questions over every unit that we're going to cover. So they can pull like one question from the Federal Aviation Regulations, so they could pull all the questions from aerodynamics. It's a whole random shot. They're going to shotgun onto a test board whenever you finally take it. And so it's that's why we're doing it now. We're going in, we're beating the questions into our heads to kind of understand, like, okay, what are they going to be asking? How are they going to be testing? How are they going to be? We need to answer. So it's just a kind of a memorization practice, but at the same time, we're learning all the details behind those questions.
Gotcha.
Yes, ma'am.
So is it the same exact question?
That's going to be on the final exam, like the Part 107? Yes. Yeah, it's a test bank. So they're going to be pulling everything you're seeing now is going to be on the exam. That's why I'm pushing to, hey, that's all the homework. I just want you to memorize these questions or look at these questions. Because if you get to the point where you've done it so many times, then you're like, oh, you're not even thinking, you're not even looking at the answer choices. You're just by reading the question, you know exactly what the answer is.
That's it. It was one question that it was two answers to, but then how do you know which one to really zoom in on? Because
less than 55.
Mhm.
Less than 55, or we got 55 in there.
So what you're talking about? What was the, which question are you talking about? Like, are you,
I read the next class.
okay.
It was like what you like. It was two other answers, but then it was the, like you said, 55 that they were looking for.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, they, for whatever reason, FAA, they're sometimes the questions aren't the most prevalent or should be the right, but you would consider think how you write the question, or the right answer. For whatever reason, I don't know if these guys that made it just got kind of tired, or just kind of like throwing stuff together a little bit, or what. But you've got to. That's why we're going through the questions so much, because you kind of got to get into their mentality of how they perceive the answer to be off of the information given on the question. So it's so you're right. Like it could be a lot of times there is two answers that are correct, but through going through and doing it so many times, you get to the point where you're like, okay, yeah, this at first glance seems this is right, but because the FAA says the FAA is, we're going to go with this, and that's how we just got to get that mentality. That's the whole point of going through this. So, answer your question?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yes.
We started before in 5, but when the test covered like 1 through the ones we didn't go over yet.
So the next quiz or test is all going to be what we previously covered. Does that make sense? So like we're going to do part unit 5 today. We're going to do the homework has it broken down for this week for the FARs, which is kind of the couple of things. I'll go through and show you what I mean by selecting that for the practice test homework. And then, so everything from this point on is testable. But it's going to be off of what you've already done at your homework. I'm not throwing curveballs at you. I'm going to throw like some couple bonus questions or something that I've mentioned 100 times in class, but it's off of like a whole general concept. I'm not going to try to trick you with some of this stuff.
It was the test was going to be
Right. Yeah, it's not going to be that. It's kind of weird. I notice we're bouncing around with like unit 5, and go back to unit 1, we're going to hit like unit 9, but it's all to help make it more fluid in the sense of how I thought that everybody should learn this material. So we're getting the basics, laying the foundation of aviation and what the FAA is going to require first, and then we're going to get more into the weeds of like fuller, broader concepts, how to use your drone correctly, so on. So does that make sense? Okay. Awesome. Any other questions or anything? Great. Want a little bit of clarification? More. All right. So federal aviation regulations. I told you, I showed you last week all the different resources that are available to you that FAA's provided for us. And remember this guy? This is our go-to aviation Bible, lack of a better word. Just to give you all relevance. Most of this, like I said, was it's all aviation information. But when you look at it, part 1 of 7 starts there and ends there. This is the drone regulations, right here. They're like 10 pages out of this whole thing. That's the only thing the FAA has made so far, off of drone requirement. The pilots that need to know what's in it, how to safely operate as an national airspace. So there's not a whole lot, right? Like, well, why don't we make 9 weeks of something that's literally 2 pages worth? Well, there's a little bit more to it. There's a lot of leaning upon the first half of this book and second half of this book that is applied through that whole section. So that's what we're going to cover today. Is what do they mean by what they say in legal jargon and what the legal interpretation is of how we need to properly apply those interpretations to what we're doing. So the FARs, they're online. You just go FAA.gov, and they've broken it down fairly well. They try to keep it easy to understand. They try to make sure like they're not filling you full like legal jargon that nobody knows what's going on. They kind of go through, make sure that they're very clear about what they want you to do and how you want them to do it. So I forgot to put that link there. Let's go ahead and watch this little video and kind of expound upon what we talked about last week with the FAA's mission.
They're amazing inventions, and they're changing the skies and how we think about the future of flight. And the FAA is on the front line of this change, committed to ensuring the dynamic shift is done safely. Think about this. The number of hobbyist and recreational drones could go from more than 1 million in 2018 to more than 3 million by 2022. The commercial drone fleet could go from nearly 300,000 in 2018 to almost 1 million by 2022. The pace of innovation in the drone industry is mind-boggling. And the ways drones are being used are changing the world, making our lives safer in a lot of ways, too. As this breakneck growth of the UAS industry continues, the FAA is working to integrate drones into the national airspace system in the safest way possible. First, we created an online registration system for small drones. Then we established the small UAS rule to allow routine, low-risk drone operations. And it only took 2 years to register over 1 million drones. That's more than 3 times the number of traditional manned aircraft registered over decades. And now we've got the UAS Integration Pilot Program, or IPP, up and running in locations across the country. This partnership with state, tribal, and local governments is exploring how drones can be operated safely in a variety of applications.
So as soon as the Phonetic drone takes off, it'll actually show the area in which that flight is anticipated to take place.
Drone flights have already taken place under the program, flying beyond visual line of sight to deliver food in Virginia, and flying over people to deliver medicine in North Carolina, inspecting remote pipelines, transmission lines, roads, and other infrastructure in Kansas, monitoring crops, assisting firefighters in San Diego, filming football tailgate parties in North Dakota, inspecting airport perimeters in Tennessee, and even helping control feral hogs in Oklahoma. We also have 7 UAS test sites all across the country, where they're doing advanced research into new drone operation concepts. This includes testing ground-based and airborne radar surveillance to facilitate routine operations beyond the pilot's line of sight in North Dakota, and an unmanned traffic management platform in New York. Then there's the low-altitude authorization and notification capability, or LANS, that allows drone operators to receive near real-time access to airspace near airports. And you do all this with an app on your phone or computer. LANS is a critical step toward a future UAS traffic management system that will include remote identification and dynamic airspace management. The FAA is collaborating with industry through the Partnership for Safety program to facilitate drone safety in commercial operations, including Xcel Energy's drone flights over electrical lines and Amazon Prime Air's efforts to deliver small packages. At the FAA, our goal is to facilitate the safe integration of drones into the national airspace system. We're at the forefront of the effort to manage the unmanned revolution. And along the way, we're making history together in real time.
All right, so get everybody fired up. Woo, drones. So yeah, they, like I was talking about last week, drones are
terrible wildfires in western United States. They're battling on ground, and you
check it out.
can help these firefighters save lives. You own a drone.
Yeah, and don't fly drones near wildfires. All right. So, okay, so yeah, like I talked about last week, FAA's their ultimate goal right now is to get drones integrated into the national airspace system on top of all the other things they have to worry about with regards to maintaining safety of all the aircraft, domestic travel, cargo travel, and all that. So, a few key points that came from that. Obviously, drones are growing at an exponential rate, so they're only going to get more and more regulated. That's why we have to stay on top of this stuff to make sure that we're staying legal, what we do, and how we do it. One of the big things you saw there was the Land C. Land C is going to be your best friend. It's what the FAA pretty much gave power to the pilots in regards to doing drone operations in certain areas that were used to be considered completely forbidden, like absolutely not allowed to. So now you can go on to AirMap or Before You Fly. There's a handful of other service providers and private companies that work with the FAA to provide a system and a streamlined process where all you got to do is plug in your name, plug in your pilot number, what kind of operation you're doing. What are the two main operations that drone pilots can do? I remember. Commercial and obvious, that's right. Plug that in, and then you just say like, yeah, I'm gonna be flying from this time to this time, and I would like to have this altitude. And on the map, it tells you what you're automatically authorized for. It'll say, yeah, you can fly up to 100 feet, or yeah, you can fly up to 400 feet. Or it'll say, nope, you're not allowed to do this at all. So it's always good to check to make sure that you're flying legally, just in case something happens, and they start wondering like, okay, well, where's your authorization? We talked about that's not good. So, so the land sea is a big one. Obviously, the drone registration is a big one. They've rolled out and are continuing to streamline through the drone zone. Link there in the website they have rolling, and then now with the new law, I guess, advisory circular that passed. It basically a mandate that's this past April, which lets us now fly at night as long as we have that lights on our drone, and we can do operations with people. Before we get into the weeds, all that with categories and what you're allowed to do, what type of drone. We'll start just going through the basics and of the FAR. So, like we talked about, here's the main concepts around the FARs and why they're written the way they're written. We got to make sure we're staying away from aircraft and the airport environments or air drones. Also, make sure the pilots are legally and are proved through the knowledge testing and everything to understand where and how you're supposed to do stuff. And of course, airspace, rules of flight. So FARs are broken down into these main sections. So the most important of which is obviously the general operating rules, but you need to know how to get your remote pilot certification, which is what we're doing now. We're working through the course to understand what the test is going to require of us. And the new part of operation of human beings or people, subpart D, and then how to get around if your operation is not within those other four sections, how to go about getting a waiver to, hey, my operation is outside of the bounds of this one. Can I get an exception for that? And that's the subpart E. So, so where do we find them? They're online on the FAA website. Obviously, this is the, we want a physical copy. It's the FAR AAM. ASA is the company that kind of makes most of these books. It comes to the PHAC or the Airplane Flying Handbook, or the Small Drones Handbook. They have a ton of resources that the Department of Transportation seal. You always want to make sure you have that DOT seal on your stuff to make sure it's legal. We're at the newest version as well. But they're the ones who do that. If you want a physical copy, I highly recommend having one. Or you can go online. All of it's online on the legal doctrine website. Find school FAR, and then whatever next year or this year is. And so enforcement, as it comes down to it, there's not sky cops rolling around patrolling the skies, making sure that you're staying within your airspace boundaries like constantly. So there's a sense of you have to follow the rules, but at the same time, it's kind of like if you do violate something, you're not going to, someone's not going to be there like at the point right near you violate it to give you a ticket or something. So it's kind of a somewhat of a trust thing, but it's also they don't have the resources to kind of go around and monitor everybody to do this stuff. That's why it's a lot of, if you do wind up flying into an airplane or flying somewhere where you're not supposed to, or someone says like, hey, that guy's not doing something right, then you can have the FAA investigators come out, law enforcement, air traffic control can call you up. They have your name, telephone number, which is supposed to be when you submit your authorization, and then you can go from there. FAA can do actions such as take your pilot's license away, um, say that you have to go do certain kind of current training, like redo the course, or they can recommend to authorities prosecutable actions that they deem, since you violated this or did a criminal offense, they can recommend, hey, this is probably what you should do with this person. So it's kind of important. They take that stuff seriously, like we talked about before. Safety is their main concern. They don't care if you, like I said, it's kind of crash, but they don't care if you hurt yourself. Just stay away from or putting other people at risk is their main objective. So regulations they don't apply to inside. So if you're flying your stuff inside, it's not an airspace. So you're pretty good on that. Obviously, there's a risk associated with doing that. You don't have GPS or there's people around. You want to make sure that you're flying safely. But you want to give plenty of notice for whatever reason. If the FAA decides that they want to, hey, where's your stuff? Can I see your license? Can I see your certificate? Can I see your aircraft? Depending on what type of operation you're doing, and especially with a waivered operation, you have to have like all that information readily available for them, and you have to submit it to them. We'll go through the different timelines when they do request something, and you have to give it back to them. And hopefully you never have to get in that situation, but here's what they'll do if it does happen. So like I said before, your certificate can be suspended or canceled. And if they request you to contact them, it's usually not a good sign. If a pilot, for example, like flying around and they violate an authorization by the FAA. So say someone's flying in just regular airplanes flying into Montgomery Airport down here, and air traffic controller tells them, all right, hey Cessna 467 Mike Bravo, turn left heading 361 or 30030 and descend to 2,000 feet. And then you repeat back what he said with your call sign. That air traffic controller gave you a legal demand that is now, if you break that or he violates that by flying to 1,500 or maintaining at 3,000 or not turning to that heading, now that pilot is liable for whatever happens after that and can be reprimanded by the FAA for not following that direct law given by the air traffic controller. Does that make sense? So that's what keeps everything tight when it comes to aviation, because think about Atlanta, for example, and all the thousands of aircraft that are going in and out of there every day. They have 20 different people that one airplane will talk to that's constantly handing off, like, all right, yeah, you're coming in, okay, yeah, here you go. And they're constantly handing off each other as they get closer to the airport. They'll contact approach, then they'll contact our center, they'll contact approach, then they'll contact the tower, then they'll contact the ground once after they land. Then whenever they're ready to go, they'll contact departure, they'll contact center again, and then so on and so forth. So it's a huge line of people that control the entire airspace. There's constant communication, and everything they say to the pilot, and the pilot repeats back to the controller, they're legally required to do along the way. That's what makes this so important, because now we're in that airspace. We're not talking directly to the air traffic controllers. They don't know what we're doing. They're not giving us heading changes, and they see us on the scope turning left or turning right. We have to maintain that boundary or that airspace that they've given us through that land-sea operation or the different areas we're allowed to fly in off of and stay within our bounds. Otherwise, they can cause them to be having to change what they're giving to their pilots and the aircraft. And so it's just really important to make sure that you're maintaining those guidance. So airports. I'm not sure why I put this in here. Maybe the main thing about airports is it's good to know what kind of airport operations are and what's around the airport. Obviously, airplanes taking off and landing is important to stay away from them. That's a huge concern for drones flying near airports. But when it comes to airport operations and what they're allowed, you are allowed or not allowed to do. You can be pulling up and parking next to the gate, and you can violate some kind of ordinance that they have. So, or even taking pictures from the side of the gate on the runway. So it's important to know what you can and cannot do. The airport facility director or the chart supplement, that's supplement to the VFR sectional, is a good asset to see, okay, like what kind of operations are allowed at the airport, or if drones are even allowed there at all, or even the if you want to get in contact with the tower and be like, hey, I'm about to do this stuff. Is this all right? I've already submitted my request. And 9 out of 10 times they'll be like, why are you calling me? Don't talk to me. Yeah, that's fine. As long as you're approved, whatever. But sometimes they may have something that wasn't prevalent. And it's good to know the NOTAMs as well. And we'll talk about that later. All right. So operating hazards and risks. So laser beams, you can't attach to your drone. And you can't have like a spotlight on it unless you're an approved area to do so. That may be considered a hazard to other aircraft, especially at night. Now, some law enforcement agencies have spotlights mounted to drones, but as far as direct bright light sources, that's not really it's kind of frowned upon. Like I was talking about TFRs, NOTAMs, all that. Forest fire areas. This is not really prevalent for our area, but there's a TFRs, temporary flight restrictions, may come up last minute. And if you fly in a TFR, especially with a drone, it's a bad situation. So that's why it's important to make sure you're cleared whatever authorization website or program you go through to stay out of the way of people. So. All right, so like I said, TFRs, their FAA uses to restrict aircraft ops in certain areas. So like, for example, Auburn, for the football game, they'll have a TFR up and it starts like a couple hours before the game and ends a few hours after the game. Essentially, because it's an open air assembly and there's a bunch of people there, they don't want anybody flying over because it's just, if something, whatever may happen or the risk of it, aircraft going down in the stadium, you can kill thousands of people, so they don't risk it. Same thing goes for VIP TFR. So like president comes into town, they shut down airspace for miles. It's a giant radius. The whole, like, you have to get special authorization and have a file of flight plan. And usually the only people that are allowed to fly are regular charter aircraft or airlines themselves. If you're just a little Cessna putting around trying to take an aside, so 9 out of 10 times they won't let you go through it. But that's the difference. Like they're talking to aircraft control directly. They have direct link communication. Every like few seconds, they're like saying, "Hey, do this. Hey, do that." And so to get a drone waiver or authorization in a TFR is almost impossible. So we're last man on the totem pole. Just go ahead and get that. They don't really care. We're most airplanes are more important. I guess they've been around longer. I don't know if it's like a grandfathered in thing, but yeah, they don't really care about our importance of our operations. So DOT, government agencies, they usually can get waivers for different types of operations, but you have to go through, and it takes months to get any kind of approval like that. So I wouldn't count on it. So like I talked about before, the night operations beginning this year, as long as you have a anti-collision light visible for 3 statute miles that has a flash rate sufficient to avoid collision is what you can use to fly. So anybody know when the FAA considers night timing? When is night officially?
It's like an hour before sundown, after sundown.
You're referring to the civil twilight.
Yeah.
So that's evening civil twilight, the morning civil twilight. It's weird in as private pilots, which is essentially what we're going through. We're talking through. Y'all have the knowledge of whenever you're known this course. But in a regular airplane, they have a rule required. You have to have nav lights on from evening civil twilight to morning civil twilight, which obviously as the sun changes through the seasons, that time changes dramatically throughout the day or throughout the year. So you have to go through this Navy aeronautical almanac to find the times of this, and sometimes it's on the aviation website, so you can pull it right up. Just Google civil twilight, and there's like a nautical twilight. There's all kinds of weird different things for depending on where the sun's angle is on the horizon. The FAA somehow decided that, well, it's enough light at that point where you don't need to have your lights on, but we at least need to have your nav lights on so people can kind of see which direction you're going, just in case. So civil twilight, there's a certain rule, but that's strictly for airplane. But at night, which is from sunset to sunrise, you have to have anti-collision lighting on. Well, you say, well, it's still light outside. What's the point? Why can't we wait until an hour after or whatever? Just to keep it nice and simple, they consider the night stuff to sunset to sunrise. Make it safe. That way there's no argument, and nobody will have any shadow of doubt because it's still sunny outside or it's still a little bit of light, and they'll make sure you're good. So, and the key point, use my laser beam here. The key one is 3 statute miles. Okay, make sure y'all know that. So, knock on something. All right, 3 miles. So, Operation City Airport. Advisory Circular 9066 Bravo. You're going to need to know. Probably need to know light gun signals, and like I talked about before with the chart supplement, those are airport publications or the plates. You need to know what those are. We're going to touch on published approaches just so you have an idea about how airplanes come in and how they're guided into land, but it's going to be more of a secondary understanding. But visual markings on the airport, on the runways and stuff, you're going to need to know. Light gun signals. So for whatever reason, radio communications cut out between the pilot and the air traffic controller. They had to have something else to talk to one another. So there's this little chart, and I'll show you. I don't know when I have it, but I'll pull it up one day. Where they have these little this giant, looks like a Q-beam spotlight, but it's got this multicolored red, white, and green light that's in it. And depending on what series of lights or signals are coming out of that thing means different things. Yeah, you can go ahead and land. Hey, stop where you're at. Continue circling. There's all these different things associated with this Morse code-like light signals that the tower can give to an airplane that's going around. So it's also important, if you're sitting there, you have approval to fly, and you're next to an airport, and all of a sudden you're just kind of rolling around. All of a sudden you see this flashing red light coming from the tower. You're like, what the heck? Now you'll be able to understand, oh crap, maybe an emergency maybe the airplane's coming in an emergency. He's not flying the normal flight path. He's really low, and he wants me to drop, get in and land immediately. So it's good to kind of understand and have an aviation overview of that just in case it happens. So we talked about unmanned aircraft previously. Class G Airspace, your friend. What's Class G stand for? Just think of ground. It's whatever they are. It's usually it's up to 700 feet AGL. Unless the airspace of Class E drops down, if it drops down to 700. If it's not, then it goes up to 1,200 feet AGL. So what's AGL stand for? Above ground level. Okay, so just think above ground level. That's all we have to worry about as drone pilots. It's just above ground. Regular pilots have to deal with mean sea level and have to change the barometer depending, so that the air traffic controller knows exactly what altitude they see, because depending on where they're at, their altitude can change because of the pressure. So, but we're not worried about that. We're just worried about above the ground. Yes, sir.
Which one's more accurate? You think the above ground level is not inaccurate?
If you're using a barometer, well, no, the above ground is more accurate because it's this where the ground is at down.
Well, I was thinking about, because if you're on a mountaintop or something like that, and the ground level is higher than sea level,
right?
Sea level can be pretty much the same planet. So I was thinking that the sea level would be more accurate. But You say it's above ground?
Yeah, just above ground, which is confusing because some operations, especially in like high elevation areas, and you got to do a mapping mission. Well, all of a sudden you're on a mountain and you got to change your air drone has got to stay underneath 400 feet AGL. Now this thing is dropping like however tall the elevation is down to be able to map something, which could be a lot easier if I just, hey, can I just get this block of airspace right here at whatever MSL? There's no way for us to be able to tell because we don't have barometric altimeters on our drones. So at least what is it, commercial now, like in the military does, but those are separate. But just the AGL itself, we'll be able to tell from the takeoff point of the drone. Usually, be able to update it, and it has a flight planning map in it that has a topography, elevation already set up and what it's doing. So where it's at, it can geolocate its position off the previous map uploaded and know how far off the ground it is.
So it just depends on what type of drone you invest in, pretty much.
Yeah.
The higher up you go, the more computer technology it has in it to recognize the layout of the land and whatnot.
Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of like if you're doing large flight planning missions and stuff, that depending on the software that you have, they should have the technology, and you can upload the topography map and give it elevation figures so it knows exactly. Okay, well this far up above the ground. So main point is though, just always remember AGL is above ground level. MSL doesn't really apply to us at this point. Okay. All right. So collision avoidance. Main purpose of a PIC, and what's a PIC? Violent command, yeah. So as a PIC, always yield the right of way. Like I said, bottom totem pole, unmanned aircraft or a drone has to get out of the way of everything. Balloons, kites, all that. We'll just get anything that comes up that may have a potential close call or
So that'd be like a helicopter flying from a hospital somewhere.
exactly helicopter, glider, hand glider. You got to get out of their way. They consider it because we don't have a person in the plane. It's a remote, and usually 9 out of 10 other things do have people in that vehicle. We have to give them right away because we're more agile. The FAA looks at it like who's more agile. So C-130, giant big old boy going down flying around, and you got a little Cessna 172. Which one has the right of way? The FAA thinks like, okay, well the Cessna is probably a little more agile. It's a single engine highway plane, so it needs to get out of the way of that big guy. Same thing goes for like a balloon. A balloon literally can't navigate. It's just like with the wind, just kind of like floats along. So all other aircraft have to kind of get out of their way because they're just kind of hanging out chilling. So, does that make sense? Talk about that? Okay. And we'll talk about what the FAA considers a close call or almost a near air miss. Usually it's like within 1,000 feet or so. But that's usually if it's like 2 airplanes that are pretty fast and they want to make sure you got plenty of distance away. But yeah, so if you see anything you're flying a drone around, just get out of the way. Like you know you're at your whatever required altitude and you're in your authorized airspace and you're doing your thing. You felt good. You took the course. You got your brand new plastic Part 107 certificate in your pocket, and you're just hanging out. And all of a sudden, you see a Cessna flying real low at your drone. Just get out of the way. It's that's what is required of us. Okay. All right. So yeehaw. So let's dive right in. So we're talking about airspace, vicinity airports. So we're going to get a little bit more into airspace itself. And talk about class Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and lateral areas of class E. And we're talking about class E is above class G only in certain situations. So we'll use our VFR sectional chart. Remember that big map I showed you? That's going to be able to identify all of this. Now, the only weird thing is, though, class G airspace is not identified on the map. It's weird. Kind of weird, like why would they do that? But as we go along, we'll start working on the maps. We'll pull those up and start looking through them. You won't be able to see class G. It's just invisible. It's implied. Same thing for Class E airspace. The only Class E airspace you'll see on your map is where it drops below near airports usually. So we'll talk about that magenta kind of fuzzy ring that's on those maps. I don't know if you'll take a look at the VFR sectors and that. But that's where Class E kind of like drops down a little bit lower. And so everything else is Class E. So remember, Class G airspace goes up to 1,200 feet. And then it's Class Echo airspace above that up until we run into one of those, Class D, C, or B. But we'll get all the detailed stuff of that later. We'll go over airspace. So just know that there's a lot of moving parts in different areas that you're going to and will be in. So you need to know, you need to be able to go in, okay, I'm going to be flying here, and then expound out like, okay, well, what's around me? Can I fly here? What kind of airspace is here? Are there any other hazards or any like government federally restricted airspace areas around here, and so on. So operation certain airspace. We're not allowed to operate in Class B, C, or D within the lateral boundaries of Class E, except for when we have prior authorization from Air Traffic Control. So just know that that's where those things talk about Land C and all those other air map and all that will be able to help us maintain not violating Part 107-0.41. Same thing goes for 107.43. Can't interfere with operation of a traffic pattern, airport, heliport, seaplane base. So military flight areas, those are, you should be able to see those through the NOTAMs. So anybody heard of a NOTAM nodes before? You know what those are? They're a notice to airmen. They're basically like a advisory that Air Traffic Control throws out. They're like, hey, FYI, this is going on. And sometimes it'll be like, hey, there's some construction on the runway, or hey, the tower's closed from this time to this time, or more prevalent ones like, hey, no drone ops in this certain area of the airspace because of X, Y, and Z. We'll always have a beginning time and an end time, and give latitude and longitude boundaries on those nodes. So it's extremely important to know and look up those before every flight, because you're going to be checking NOTAMs, you're going to be checking TFR, and you're checking on the node rows and stuff. And you should be able to see, based off your knowledge of the VFR sectional chart, if it's a special flight rules area, which is the restricted, prohibited, all that kind of airspace. So, and we'll go through that. You'll be experts at it in no time here in the next couple of weeks. So then we talked about got to request authorization through this Land C if you're flying in those airspace, that airspace we talked about before. If you're not flying in that airspace, you don't have to submit Land C. Pretty great, right? So if you're out there, you're trying to try to be away from any kind of airspace and just kind of fly your drone around, you don't have to worry about it. FAA doesn't really care. They're only worried about the stuff that they control. And if it's uncontrolled airspace, which is Class G and Class E, then they're like, cool, have fun. You can throw out an FYI on some of those Land C providers like AirMap and like the Kitty Hawk before you fly out. But as far as the FAA is concerned, if you're not in airspace or underneath it, they don't really care. All right, so let me talk about Land C. Drone pilots access at below 400 feet, awareness where pilots cannot fly. This data exchange is pretty nice and it's pretty easy. They've made it for us. So give you a little more detail. Look at what Land C is. We already talked about this. I think we did.
face it, flying a drone is fun, and it can be important for your business. But it's also a big deal when you're flying in certain areas, like controlled airspace near airports. Recognizing the need for a safe and efficient approval process to fly drones in these situations, the FAA developed the Low Altitude Authorization and Notification Capability, called LANS for short. We developed LANS to automate authorizations into controlled airspace, so we worked closely with industry partners and based it all on data sharing principles. LANS is a major step toward creating a true operationalized unmanned airspace traffic management ecosystem. LANS is a collaboration between the FAA and industry that allows drone pilots to request access to controlled airspace and receive a response just about instantly. Through LANS, the FAA provides several streams of data for our industry partners to leverage in their applications. Those data streams include UAS facility maps, temporary flight restrictions, notices to airmen, and special use airspace. Access to LANS is provided by FAA-approved companies called UAS Service Suppliers, or USS. These suppliers have developed desktop and mobile applications that allow drone pilots to connect to LANS and receive an FAA-approved authorization in near real time. A key advantage of LANS is that it offers drone operators more flexibility and reduces the time it takes to receive airspace authorizations to mere seconds, instead of the weeks that it used to take through the manual process. A further benefit is that LANS allows air traffic managers to see where planned drone operations will take place. The LANS experience for the drone operator is an easy-to-use app. Step 1, the FAA provides airspace data to the USS through the FAA's UAS Data Exchange. Step 2, the USS create interactive planning tools of controlled airspace up to 400 feet based on that FAA data. Step 3, drone pilots request airspace authorizations through the apps on their smartphones or desktop computers. Step 4, the USS sends applicants' authorization information to the FAA. Once the FAA provides an electronic acknowledgement of receipt, the USS transmits FAA authorizations to the drone pilot. This all happens in a matter of seconds. On April 30th, 2018, the FAA began a nationwide beta test, deploying LANS at nearly 300 federal air traffic facilities covering almost 500 airports. The final wave of nationwide deployment was completed in September 2018. Safety is our top priority, but it's also everyone's shared responsibility. That's what LANS is all about, as we collaborate to safely and fully integrate drones into the national airspace system.
All right. What do y'all think about that?
Get there.
Getting there?
Yep.
Yeah, all right. So, yeah, so essentially what we're talking about. So I keep saying LANS C. I don't know why. It's just LANS. That C on the end kind of throws me off, I guess. But yeah, so we use LANS. It helps them talk to us talk to them, give them FI what we're doing. That's all I really want to know. As long as we're not doing anything, as long as we're not doing anything illegal that causes them extra stress and violate anything, risky situation. So that's the cool thing about that. All right, so radio communications. We're not necessarily going to be talking on the radio. We don't need to. We give them an FYI through LANS, tell them what we're doing. That's all they really want to know. If they're going to talk to you, they're going to call you. You get a call from them, that's not good. So, but you have to have your phone on. You have to have ready just in case they need to get a hold of you. Because they, 9 out of 10 times, whenever that happens, you probably got to have proof of like, hey, I wouldn't do anything illegal. Here you go. Here's all my stuff that we talked about before. We have to have when we're doing certain operations. Most of which is going to be your certificate, your government issued photo ID, and then whatever operation authorization you have. Okay, so those are the 3 main things. Remember that. But radio communications, it's just good to know. FA expects you to be able to speak phonetically and understand whatever the phonetic alphabet is utilized. Which came about through the ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. Basically, it's everybody in the entire world that flies airplanes uses this type of phraseology is the word for it. But it's just basically like that Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, all that kind of military lingo.
So who determines your call name?
You don't have one. You don't need one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you
As long as you got a FAA registration sticker on your drone, and you have those other things like the certification, your license, and your authorization, and depending on if you have a waiver, which will be a whole separate set of requirements to have. As long as you have those things for general operations, you're fine. That's all you need to do. They'll know your name. You have to submit your name and your certificate number and phone number and stuff. But that's all. If they need to get a hold of you, all you got to do, they're just going to call you directly. So, yeah, big deal, right? Be able to get your phone number now. So, all right. So we talked about aerodrome. Like I said, this is Canadian jargon. We really don't use aerodrome in the U.S. It's more just airport, but it's any area, land, water, used for aircraft operations. You got the airport, you got the pilot command, daytime and nighttime. Like I said, it's more so sunset to sunrise is what you need to worry about. Okay, so sunset, sunrise, make sure your lights are on. And if you don't have lights, you can't fly from that point. Here's the phonetic alphabet and the Morse code associated to it. I'm not going to expect you to know the Morse or learn the Morse code. It's like 1940 stuff. We're a little bit more advanced with satellites and whatnot now. So if you want to learn it, cool, great. If not, no worries. There's the way to pronounce it on the right side of each one of those. But if you come at me and say the word firewire, just don't. Just worry about that, okay? But some of those kind of funny sounding. But it's in order to distinct between some radio communications that are kind of hard to understand between 5 and 9. So that's why they kind of break it up into those weird pronunciations. But ICAO, phonetic alphabet. So other things that the FAA identifies and the definitions are associated with it. We already mandate control station and command and control link. Need to know that FPV or first person device, view device. That's right. But, all right, so flight termination system. It's got to have some requirements in the depending on the operation require you to have a way to turn the drone off completely in flight. Fly away. It's another risky thing that may happen to a drone. It's going just kind of doing its thing, just takes off. And so mandatory action, payload, objects, stuff that you carry on board. Visual line of sight or VLOS, we've already talked about that. And then visual observer, which is the person that you use to help you see the aircraft if you're in an operation that requires it. So, some more regulations from the beginning. You can tell this is straight from the book. So it's straight from that far end right there. It's pretty dry. You gotta, what is it even asking? So it's like lawyer jargon. So it's always referring back to something else that has a more expounded version of what it is. So you need to be able to kind of read between the weeds of what this is, but at the same time, you need to kind of understand the overarching understanding of what it's trying to say. So as far as applicability, can't even say it. It doesn't apply to air carriers or any kind of regular aircraft pilot operations. Section 333, that was what used to be the waiver section, but that wound up being canceled with all this new initiatives for the FAA. So there's 1 and 2 of the 107. Corrective lenses, that's kind of important. When it comes to visual line of sight, they don't want you to be able to only be able to see the drone through binoculars. That doesn't count. Only you wearing glasses or contact lenses or your straight eyeballs to be able to see the drone is what counts when it comes to is that drone within visual line of sight. Okay. And control station is what you use for PK with it in declaration compliance. That's having to do with the new aircraft operations that were submitted back in April of this year when it comes to category 1, 2, or 3. You have to have declaration of compliance is the new guidance on that. So definitions continued. We talked about those. You can't falsify stuff. That's extremely illegal. Can't. And this is the what may happen if you do. Also, it's kind of important that you have to get your remote pilot certificate and rating if you're exercising this for commercial purposes. So we're talking about the difference between hobbyist and recreational and commercial. If you're making money off this, you got to have your Part 107. And these are all the people that you have to be able to present this stuff, your certification, and your license and stuff too. So the administrators, anytime you see the word the administrator, that's the FAA. NTSB, those are the folks that when there's an accident, they come in and kind of figure out what happened. They give the detailed inspection and investigation and report to the FAA. FAA is the folks that give the legal action recommendation, either take your license or recommend criminal penalty to the actual authorities. So it's good to know the difference between NTSB and the FAA. Any federal, state, local law enforcement, and obviously the TSA. You have to be able to give your stuff to them if they ask. So.
It's very from state. Like once you get the drone certificate here in Alabama, does it works in Georgia and all the other different?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's reciprocity. So yeah, it's federal. Once you have your Part 107, it's a federal certificate. You can do that in any state, territory, whatever. Obviously, we'll look at the rules before you go there. Start flying a drone around, like the in Hawaii and whatnot. But yeah, so I would definitely it's a federal license or federal certificate. We don't say the word license because it can expire and you can jump through the hoops to get it again. That's why we'll say license. So just it's more like pilot pet peeve things they have out there. But all right, so this is another. It's talking about the Declaration of Compliance under Subpart D with the waiver section. I wouldn't worry too much about that. It's like getting real far in the weeds when it comes to getting the waivers. We'll talk about it briefly at the end of the course and how to jump through the hoops of getting a waiver to do certain things that aren't allowed in whatever areas. But so that's what is 7.9 accident reporting. So I'd write that down. 10 calendar days. So if you hit something, and this is legal jargon, so you got to kind of read between what they're asking and what they're implying. So if something happens after an operation that meets the criteria of this paragraph or this paragraph, then the remote pilot in command, so the PIC that was doing that operation, must report to the FAA in a manner acceptable to the administrator. So that's determined by the administrator, whether it's like a phone call, an email, a letter, first-class letter, or if they call you in to do like a full-on like sit down across the table with like a lawyer kind of meeting. So that's the manner up to them. Any operation of a small unmanned aircraft involving at least serious injury to any person or loss of consciousness. So if any of that happens in A, this applies. Does that make sense? Yeah, good? Okay. Or damage to property unless one of the following conditions is satisfied. The repair, including materials and labor, does not exceed $500. So if you broke your Phantom that costs like $300 and it hit somebody's gutter, and the gutter is like $50, and the Phantom's $250, $300. Do you have to report that to the FAA? No. Good stuff. Or fair market value of property does not exceed $500 of minimum loss. So this is really in the weeds. This is really into where the FAA has this guidance here in case something happens. But like I talked about at the beginning of the class, no sky cop turn around. If you're found out and something happens, this is where they can give you and take your license or take your certificate from you. So it's up to you as a professional drone pilot to use the law to the degree that you need to in order to stay legal. Okay. All right, and the small U.S. rating. So we talked about applicability. Yep. So operating rules for this. So we can't manipulate flight controls unless we have a certificate, small U.S. rating, issued per subpart C, which is the testing and stuff we're doing now. We'll be taking the Part 107 exam, all that. And, or, see this? This is another kind of in the weeds thing. So, no person may manipulate the flight controls of a small UAS unless we go through the hoops and get what? A Part 107 certificate, or that person has a remote certificate, or, see a little or right there? It's really important. That person's under direct supervision of a remote PIC, and the remote PIC has the ability to immediately take direct control of the flight of the small unmanned aircraft. All right, so what does that mean? So,
Like your teacher has to be there with you.
exactly. So say Lucas and I we're out flying in the backyard, hanging out. Lucas is like, hey man, can I fly that thing? Oh yeah, absolutely. You know why? 107.12 says, sure, as long as I'm right here beside you, and I can take direct control unless something happens. He starts freaking out or starts doing something weird. It starts flying away. Lucas gives it back to me. I take direct control. Now we're still flying legally, even though he doesn't have yet the Part 107 certificate, and I do. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Awesome. So, see what I'm getting at? You gotta boil down what the hell they're trying to say with some of this stuff. But it's super important because now these little tidbit rules give us a little bit more extra. Oh, okay. Now I can actually do a little bit more than I thought. I can actually teach somebody or help somebody learn how to drones work and stuff through the guidance given by them. And all right, so yeah, and it goes on to say subpart C, got to make sure consistent with standards, authorization, operation. Yeah, that's essentially talking about if you registered an aircraft out of state. So let's say the folks at Can Drone that I work for have a foreign registered drone and bring it down, it can still count, and they don't necessarily have to have an FAA issued pilot certificate to fly it, because if it's a drone registered in Canada, they think that they have already jumped through the hoops of the Canadian and international community of aviation standards, which are kind of not loosely, it's fairly tightly together. They all kind of have the same kind of guidance. Like, yeah, sure, you're welcome to fly here, but you got to make sure it meets these certain parameters. So it's another kind of weird off left field thing, but like this, they're trying to cover as far of a cast net with this stuff as possible through these regulations, and also give you as much leeway as possible without increasing risk. So registration, you got to register as long as you're owner operation aircraft. Second copy aircraft registration at 47, which is like aircraft in general registration requirements, or registrants through issued laws of foreign country. Kind of covered that. Prior to each flight, remote pilot command must check the small unmanned aircraft system to determine whether it's conditioned to safe operation. So if you're this kind of covers if you're take your drone out of your car, get it fired up, and all of a sudden you notice a wingtip is broken, and you're a drone pilot, you've been flying these things for a while, you know what the thing's capable of. You don't think it's really that hazardous. If you take off and fly with that thing, is that a condition of safe operation?
No.
Because what could happen? That split or that crack could grow, and all of a sudden you lose an entire propeller or wing, and that thing slams into the side of a car and hurts or does worse somebody. So that's why it's always important they want you to make sure that through this law that you check your thing out every time before it takes off. So that's an important one. No person may continue the flight of an unmanned aircraft when he or she knows or has reason to know. So if they can prove that you knew or even had reason to know that the system was no longer in condition of safe operation, that's on you. Essentially what it says. They like you sent a text saying, hey man, I don't think this thing's all right. Your boss was like, well, I don't care. We got to get this done. That's on you if something happens. Does that make sense? Because then at that point you already knew, but you decided to continue the operation regardless. All right, so medical condition. This is kind of like another CASNet thing where it's like they want it to be safe, but there's not really like a pinpoint, like, okay, well, you can't do this. It's more just like all right, here's a general thing. So no person may operate a civil small unmanned aircraft system unless it is in a condition of safe operation. Prior to each flight, the remote pilot in command must check small aircraft system to determine whether it's in condition of safe operation. I don't know why it's double down. I may have messed that one up. No person may continue to fly a small unmanned aircraft unless when he or she knows, if you know, what am I doing? I must have messed that one up. My bad. I'll go back and see what number 18. That's what it was. I missed 18. Okay, let's read down the book. All right. So let's see. Part 107, 18. Medical condition. All right, here we go. No person. No, that's 17. Okay, here we go. So, no person may manipulate the flight controls of a small unmanned aircraft system or act as a remote command, visual observer, direct participant in the operation of a small UAS if he or she knows that has reason to know he or she has a physical or mental condition that would interfere with the safe operation of the UAS. Pretty broad, isn't it? So what this means is you go to the hospital the day before and find out that you have a pretty severe heart condition, or like you had a stroke or something, or you're like in a mental capacity that's like unfit to, like where your doctor says, hey, you probably shouldn't operate machinery and drive, and then you go out there and fly a drone, hurt somebody, this can come back and get you. So just make sure that you're in a condition by your doctor, or like you feel good, and you should be fine. There's no medical requirement for you to fly a drone. This part, let's see, 107.17 medical condition is just a CASNet thing saying, hey, just make sure you're in good shape to go, so you don't hurt anybody. As far as like regular airplane pilot license and medical certificate stuff, they have to go through do a medical evaluation, aviation medical evaluation through a air medical doctor, and they do check their eyes and all that kind of stuff. But as drone pilots, we don't have to worry about that yet. So just make sure you're in good shape to go. All right, so next one is the PIC is directly responsible and is the final authority. So anything that happens in an operation, whether it's 20 people with your operation or just you, everything comes back onto you. You have the plastic card. You're the one who requested the airspace. You requested and got approval of operation. The FAA has put all of their trust in the world onto you to follow the rules. You're at fault. Something happens. Okay? That's essentially what that is. But here's the cool thing. What if something happens? Oh no. What's that bold thing say? You want to read it for me? What's that bold part say? Can you read that?
Of this part to extend necessary to meet the emergency. Which part?
The bold part starting right there.
Oh, the remote pilot and command may deviate from any rule of this part to the extent necessary to meet that emergency.
Oh, there's a life vest. Thank God, I won't get in trouble. So if something happens, essentially we could fly over the top of Atlanta Hartsfield and land that drone in the center of the runway if it's an emergency. I mean, I highly recommend doing that. It's kind of messed up. You got a lot of explaining to do if that happens. But what this means is that if there's an emergency, this doesn't matter. Do what you know as a pilot for the time that is important during emergency to get that drone on the ground and or put it somewhere safe. This is thrown out the window. As long as you're doing something that's causing it, if it's an emergency, we can deviate from any rule. Okay? But you gotta be able to prove that was an emergency. They're gonna be asking questions, obviously, when it happens, but don't hurt yourself or someone else because you didn't want to like violate airspace or like do something that you knew was a egregious offense in the FAA's eyes or a specific rule. So you have the ability to deviate from any of the rules in an emergency. And then what's the very next part? When you deviate from a rule, must, upon request of the administrator from the FAA, when they ask, send a written report of what happened. So be ready to write a paper or call them on the phone. They're going to know what happened. So if that does happen, I would recommend get a lawyer or talk to an aviation professional first, just in case, to make sure that your story's straight and you're not doing anything.
So it'd be like if a bird hit your drone color. Now it kind of off balance, so now I have to land it.
Right.
Because it's an uncontrollable flying device.
Yep.
So now I'm authorized to do whatever I have to do to land.
Exactly. So everybody's seen like videos of like airplanes landing in the middle of highways. Yep. What are you gonna do when your engine goes out? You know, fly to a tree. No, those guys like, hey, there's a road there. It's an emergency. Those guys didn't get in trouble. I mean, obviously, have to make sure that they had the paperwork. They had the maintenance records in check and did all the things they're supposed to do to prevent that from happening. But when it comes down to it, stuff hits the fan. You got to do what you got to do, and that's how the FAA kind of puts it on the pilot's shoulders. Like, hey, no matter what, do what's important, and that's fly the thing safely in an emergency. At the same time, we got to, as professional pilots, we got to know that we're making the right decision to do that. So, all right, hazardous operation. So here's another big one, kind of cast net. Cannot be in a careless, reckless manner endanger life, property, of another, or allow object to be dropped from a small UAS in a manner that creates undue hazard to person's property. What does that mean? We can drop stuff, but it also means that we can't be doing a careless or reckless manner, endanger life, property, nothing. So that's up to you. Like even in the for airplanes, they can drop stuff out of the window technically, but is it safe? Could that be considered reckless? Yes. Right. So we got to, as professional pilots, we got to make that decision. If it's like an operation where we go like, hey, I got to deliver this box of insulin to this like mountain village. And the only way to get there is via drone because all the roads in this emergency are out. At that point, it's kind of like, well, where the risk and hazards here. Yeah, it's kind of important. Like these guys get their insulin or the medical, whatever. And then as a professional pilot, we set up the operation to be as safe as possible, or we cordon up the area and make it happen. So that's kind of like where the mindset is. We're like, okay, what if situation occurs? This doesn't block it out completely. Does that make sense? That's kind of like how the FAA builds their stuff. They want to make sure there's room for people who want to follow the rules can get whatever they need done operationally, but at the same time, they keep it safe for everybody else. Yeah, there you go. All right, so moved vehicle aircraft. So are we allowed to fly over moving or fly inside of a moving vehicle or aircraft? We can, if we are over a sparsely populated area and not transporting another person's property compensation higher. I'm not sure why that's in there. Maybe there's like some like weird caveat that someone came up with, like I can deliver something for via drone while I'm driving. I don't know, but yeah. So that's the little caveat on there. So that's 107.25. All right, here's another big one. FAA does not play with this stuff. So pilot command visual observer must, so not only you as a PIC, but your visual observer must comply with provisions of 91.17. So what is 91? What is it? 17?
Is it 8 hours, 10 hours? Is it drinking?
Let's see. 91.17. Here we go. So, alcohol or drugs. So, like, see how it says, it doesn't even talk about it. It just gives a number. So this is where the book, it refers back to your pilot section of Part 91 and the rules associated with being just a pilot in general and how you have to follow the rules there. So, 91.17, no person may act or attempt to act as a crew member of a civil aircraft, 1, within 8 hours after the consumption of any alcoholic beverage, 2, while under influence of alcohol, so including a hangover, that's still considered influence, 3, while using a drug that affects a person's faculties in any way contrary to safety, or 4, while having an alcohol concentration of 0.04 or greater. All right? So know the difference between that stuff and be able to like reference it because it applies. Because it applies, it's in Part 107.27. We're going to have to know that. So I know how to switch back and forth and know where to find this stuff. That's the main thing. FAA doesn't want you to memorize a lot of it, but the main thing is they want you to be able to find it in case it comes up and be able to do your own research. And this is where most of the research is going to be from when it comes to what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do. All right, so we talked about operation at night. That's the new Part 107.65. What's the big number there? Right there, 3 statute miles, okay? That's the flat, like how visible it is. So just remember that. It should be on your drone's manual or the manufacturer guide or whatever to tell you the information, the distance the light can shine and stuff. All that should be easy to find. So, wait, look at that. I was wrong. I'm thinking of aviation knowledge. So yeah, so civil twilight. Okay. You're right. See, it's good to go back into the rules sometimes. Get you refresh. So yeah, periods of civil twilight. So remember I was talking about like the Navy Almanac and stuff to find civil twilight. You just literally Google Navy Almanac civil twilight, and it'll be able to tell you the times that you're allowed to not fly the line of that particular day. Okay, so it's if you're trying to fly before or after, it's important to know the difference. So all right, so civil twilight first. The following, except for Alaska, around 30 minutes. I wouldn't do it. It's around 30 minutes when sunrise and sunset. So, and then official sunset ends 30 minutes after official. Yeah. So, whatever fishing prior to that. Yeah. So, and then this is referring to a prior thing, part the 333 section. I wouldn't worry about that because we don't have any of that right now. So, all right. So, visual line of sight aircraft operation. These are the things that FAA wants you to know while you're flying along. Know the aircraft's location. You can determine its altitude, attitude, and direction of flight. So what's the difference between an attitude and an altitude?
Altitude, how high?
Yep. Attitude is the, horizontal, like which direction it's kind of like turning or facing stuff. And then, or the direction is which way it's facing. Attitude is like, if it's like going up or facing down or like it's turning or whatnot. So that's attitude. We've got to observe the airspace for other air traffic or hazards, including birds, towers, power lines, all that kind of stuff. And determine unmanned aircraft does not endanger the life or property of another. So this is one of those like shotgun, casket kind of things. Like, hey, make sure you got eyes on it. These are all the general things you have to be able to determine from being able to see it. That's why you're kind of, I was saying before, like it has to be by your eyeball, not binoculars or a telescope. Because you can't really tell attitude and direction with a view enhancer like that. It's through the FAA's eyes. All right, so that's good. Visual observers, there's not really a requirement to have like 4 visual observers. They don't have to go through like some authorization test or anything like that. It's just someone that you've determined to use in your aircraft operation. So the main point here is like who's in charge of the operation.
What I have the certificate.
Right. And who's that? Remote pilot command, right? So it's up to that remote pilot command not to get some Joe Schmo off the side of the road to come help him conduct a pretty intense drone operation, right? Probably be a good idea to have somebody who kind of knows what they're talking about, or at least can be able to understand the scope of all of the things that are sitting on your shoulders as that person with that certificate to prevent any kind of hazardous situation from occurring. So the main thing, though, is to maintain effective communication with each other. That means, and you got a direct visual observation of the drone, but maintain visual effective communication with each other. You don't have to be standing side by side. This is not the thing where the remote pilot command can be give the controls over to somebody who doesn't have a certificate, can fly it around and take control immediately. It doesn't apply here. It means that if you have direct communication with that visual observer, he can be a little ways away and still maintain constant contact when you've got like an earpiece in, or you're like on a cell phone call or something. That kind of can still work together and work with that operation to maintain constant eyes on it during while you're doing it, especially if you're in the mountains and it goes over the top while you're doing a flight plan. Like, hey, this thing's probably going to lose sight of it, and you post a visual observer on that other side of the hill, and then they can grab it, maintain visual line of sight when you can't, and then you're constantly talking about like, hey, you got it? Yep, it's good, all clear. We got this, whatever altitude, everything's looking good. It's following the flight plan just as good. Everything looks great.
So how does it work when you have a camera on that unmanned aircraft?
That's strictly for situational awareness. So it's strictly to allow you to have a better idea of where it's at, what it's doing, and if it's following the inputs that you tell it to do. Legally, it doesn't matter. The FAA considers all drones, even if they do have a camera on it, you still got to maintain visual line of sight. Yeah. So, all right. So yeah, here's another catch-all that 107.35, more than one ailment aircraft at the same time. So that means that even though DJI's come out with these cool drones that can do like 4 different drones off the same controller simultaneously and do like a spray operation or mapping operation or whatever, with 35.35, we aren't allowed to do that unless we get a waiver and we can say, hey, I get this cool drone. It can the whole flight station or control station